You've served your purpose, old man. The words weren't mine. They were hers. And I played them loud enough to rattle the coffee cups. 62 heads in the Maple Creek clubhouse snapped toward the speaker. My phone. Then toward her. Tiffany's face curdled. That perfect HOA smile just dissolved. Turn that off, she hissed. Right now. I turned it up. All you have to do now is die, her recorded voice cooed through the room. Then that ranch is mine. A folding chair hit the floor. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my lord." Tiffany lunged. She didn't walk around the table. She went straight over it. Muffins exploded. Agendas scattered. Her claws caught my collar and I heard fabric tear. You miserable old witch. Her hand drew back. I caught her wrist before it landed. 67 years on a cattle ranch gives you grip strength a Pilates class won't teach you. Careful, sweetheart, I said. Assaulting a senior citizen in front of 62 witnesses. That's a felony in Texas. She tried to twist free. Couldn't. Then the clubhouse door opened. Sheriff's deputy. Federal agent. And my son Blake, carrying a folder thick with 9 years of lies. Tiffany's arm went limp in my hand. I finally let go. 3 hours earlier, I'd been scrubbing a coffee stain off Joe's shirt and praying for patience. Nobody tells you the day your world catches fire starts with laundry. Joe shuffled into the kitchen the way he does now. Slow. Careful. His hand bracing against the doorframe like the floor might tilt. You're fussing, he said. I'm cleaning. Same thing. I held up his shirt. The stain was right over the pocket. Brown and stubborn. You missed your mouth again. I missed my mouth 3 days ago. You just found it now. He had me there. I tossed the shirt into the sink and wiped my hands on my jeans. He sat down at the kitchen table, lowering himself by inches, and tapped 2 fingers twice on the wood. That tap. I knew it. He'd made a decision. Well's running muddy, he said. Pressure's dropping. I'm shutting it off this morning to flush the filter. How long? Few hours. Maybe the day. I nodded and poured him coffee. Neither of us knew yet. Neither of us could have known. Joe took the mug. His hand trembled just slightly. It did that now. 9 months ago, Tiffany started bringing him herbal tea. Special blend, she said. Good for the heart. I never questioned it because she was his daughter-in-law and you want to believe the best about family. You want to believe. I rubbed my wedding ring with my thumb. The gold was worn thin after 41 years. Joe gave me that ring when we were 26 and broke and so happy it hurt. Now the band was almost sharp enough to cut. I'll call Lester, I said. Have him come by for lunch. Lester Hayes was our lawyer. Had been for 3 decades. He was semi-retired now, which meant he showed up at our house 3 times a week for free coffee and gave us legal advice we didn't ask for. He always paused exactly 2 seconds before answering a direct question. Drove Joe crazy. What do you need Lester for? Joe asked. I don't. I just want to feed him. Joe gave me a look. I ignored it. Outside, the morning was already heating up. Texas in July has no mercy. You learn to live with it or you leave. We'd lived with it for 67 years, both of us, born on this same patch of dirt and stubborn enough to stay. The Calhoun Ranch sat on 300 acres of mesquite and pastureland, bordered on the east by Maple Creek, the subdivision, not the actual creek. They'd named it after the water feature they paved over. 20 years ago, that land was cattle pasture. Then the developers came, and the HOA rose up like a concrete mushroom, and suddenly we had neighbors who complained about the smell of manure. 62 houses. All of them fed by a single water line that, according to the county, ran straight from the municipal supply. According to the county. Joe finished his coffee and pushed himself upright. The effort cost him. I watched his knuckles go white against the table edge. "I'll go with you," I said. "To the well house?" "It's 200 yards. I need the walk." He didn't argue. That worried me more than anything. We walked together past the barn and the old corral, past the mesquite tree where Blake carved his initials when he was 11. The well house sat at the property line, a squat concrete block building with a corrugated tin roof. Joe unlocked the door and stepped inside. The pressure gauge was low. The water in the sight glass looked like weak tea. "Filter's clogged," he said. "Gotta shut it down." He reached for the main valve. I watched him turn it, that familiar squeak of old metal, the clunk of the mechanism seating home. The water stopped flowing. We walked back to the house and I started lunch. Lester arrived at noon on the dot, wearing his usual suspenders and carrying a newspaper he'd already read. "Coffee smells good," he said. I poured him a cup. He sat down. Took a sip. Said nothing for exactly 2 seconds. "Something's on your mind, Maggie." "Tiffany," I said. "She's been different lately." "Different how?" "Too helpful. Too sweet. She brought Joe tea." "She never brings Joe tea." Lester set down his mug. Another 2-second pause. "I've been meaning to talk to you about Tiffany," he said. Before he could continue, Joe's cell phone rang. He doesn't carry a cell phone. It sat on the kitchen counter where it always sits, gathering dust and battery drain. But today it rang. He answered. Listened. His face went still. "What?" I said. He hung up. That was dispatch. Someone called 911. Said we sabotaged the water supply. Sabotaged? It's our well. Lester stood up. He suddenly looked a lot less retired. "How many houses are dry?" he asked. Joe looked at him. "All of them." The next hour was chaos. 2 sheriff's deputies showed up at our gate. A county water inspector arrived in a pickup truck with a magnetic logo on the door. Tiffany stood in our driveway with her arms crossed and her lips pressed into a thin, satisfied line. She was wearing a white linen blouse. I remember that. White linen, like she was attending a garden party and not the beginning of a war. "I just want to understand," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Why would you shut off water to an entire neighborhood? Seniors live here. Children." "It's our well," I said. "We shut it off for maintenance." "Then why is Maple Creek dry?" "Good question." The water inspector was a short man with a clipboard and an attitude. He pushed past me without asking and walked toward the well house. Joe followed him. The deputies stayed by their car, hands on their belts, watching. "Ma'am, we received a report of intentional disruption of public utilities," one of them said. "That's a misdemeanor." "It's a private well," I said. "Private property. Private maintenance." Tiffany sighed like I was a difficult child. "Maggie, the paperwork clearly shows the well serves both properties. It's in the subdivision agreement. I have copies." She produced a folder. Of course she had a folder. Tiffany always had a folder. She handed it to the deputy. He flipped through the pages. Nodded. "This appears to be a valid easement," he said. "Signed and notarized. Dated 9 years ago." I took the paper from his hand. Scanned it. There was Joe's signature at the bottom. His name, spelled out in ink that looked almost right but not quite. "This is forged," I said. "That's a serious accusation," Tiffany said. "It's a serious crime." She smoothed her sleeve cuff. Just a flick of her fingers against the fabric. I'd seen her do it 100 times before, at church, at family dinners, at Blake's wedding. I'd always thought it was vanity. Now I understood. It was her tell. The water inspector emerged from the well house. His face was red. He was holding a piece of pipe. Found it, he said. Secondary line. Diverts from the main valve before it reaches the ranch's filtration. Feeds directly into the subdivision supply. Looks like it's been here for years. Tiffany gasped. A theatrical, hand-to-chest performance. I had no idea. Who would do such a thing? She was looking at Joe. Not me. Joe. The old man. The vulnerable one. The one she'd been dosing with tea for 9 months. Mr. Calhoun, the deputy said, I'm going to need you to answer some questions. Joe's hand found mine. His grip was weak, but it was there. Don't say a word, I told him. Lester. Lester stepped forward. He'd been hanging back, watching, his eyes moving from face to face. He paused exactly 2 seconds. Gentlemen, my client will be happy to cooperate once we've reviewed these documents and verified their authenticity. Until then, I advise him to remain silent. The deputy looked at Tiffany. She looked at the inspector. The inspector looked at his pipe. Nobody knew who was in charge anymore. This is absurd, Tiffany said. The evidence is right there. Joe installed an illegal tap. He's been stealing water from his own neighbors for years. The water flows from our well, I said. Into your houses. Who's stealing from who? She ignored me. She was good at that. Officer, I'd like to press charges. Theft of utilities. Property damage. And whatever else applies when someone poisons a neighborhood's water. Poisons? I said. It's well water. It's the same water we drink. Is it? Tiffany raised an eyebrow. You have livestock. Manure runoff. God knows what else. We have test results. She had test results. Another folder. Another stack of papers she'd prepared in advance. I felt the trap closing. Not around me. Around Joe. They were going to pin this on him. The forged easement. The illegal pipe. The contaminated water. An old man with a heart condition and shaky hands who couldn't defend himself in court. I rubbed my ring. The gold was warm from my skin. Tiffany, I said quietly. What exactly do you want? She smiled. Just for a second. Just enough for me to see the wolf behind the linen. I want what's best for this family, she said. Joe clearly can't manage the property anymore. Blake and I have been discussing a conservatorship. For his own protection. Joe's hand tightened on mine. A conservatorship. She wanted legal control over Joe. Over his medical decisions. His finances. The ranch. Over my dead body, I said. That can be arranged, Tiffany murmured. She said it so quietly the deputies didn't hear. But I did. And Joe did. And Lester did. Lester put a hand on my shoulder. 2-second pause. We need to talk about the tea, he said. By the time the deputies left, the sun was high and the heat was brutal. Tiffany climbed into her white Lexus and drove back to Maple Creek without looking back. The water inspector took his pipe and his clipboard and followed her. Joe sat on the porch, staring at nothing. She's been planning this, he said. I know. 9 years. She's been planning this for 9 years. I sat down beside him. The porch swing creaked. It always creaked. Same sound it made when we sat here with Blake as a baby, rocking him to sleep in the Texas twilight. We need to fight, I said. With what? She's got papers. Witnesses. The county. We have Lester. Joe laughed. It was a dry, painful sound. Lester's 74 years old and drinks too much coffee. He's also the best property lawyer in 3 counties before he semi-retired. Semi-retired means he quit but kept the stationery. I turned to face him. His eyes were rheumy. His skin was gray. 9 months of tea had done something to him. Something I couldn't see but could feel in the way he moved, the way he breathed, the way he slept 14 hours and woke up exhausted. "Did you sign that easement?" I asked. "No." "You're sure?" "I'd remember signing away my water rights, Maggie." He would. Joe forgot where he put his glasses and what day the trash went out, but he remembered every business deal he'd ever made. His mind was still sharp. Sharper than his body. "The signature was good," I said. "Too good." "Meaning?" "Meaning someone practiced it." He was quiet for a long moment. The ceiling fan clicked overhead. Same click it made when the bearings were going. "I'd been meaning to fix it for 3 years. "Blake," Joe said finally. My heart stopped. "You don't know that. He's the only one who could have gotten access to my files. My desk. My signature. He's your son. He's her husband." I didn't have an answer for that. Blake had been distant for years. Ever since the wedding, really. Tiffany pulled him into her orbit and he went willingly, the way a calf follows a bucket of feed. I told myself he'd come back. I told myself he just needed time. But 9 years is a lot of time. Lester came out onto the porch, holding a fresh cup of coffee. He'd been inside, making phone calls. "I pulled the county records," he said. "The easement was filed 9 years ago. Same month Blake and Tiffany got married. Notarized by someone named Patricia Duval." "Who's that?" 2-second pause. "Tiffany's former roommate at UT, currently employed by the county clerk's office." "Of course she is. There's more." I checked the subdivision's original permits. The water supply was supposed to be municipal. But the municipal line extension would have cost $2 million. The developer went bankrupt halfway through construction. Someone found a cheaper solution. Our well. Your well. Whoever finished the development tapped into your water and covered it up. Then Tiffany got herself elected HOA president and made sure nobody asked questions. I stood up. My legs were shaky but my mind was clear for the first time all day. So the entire subdivision was built on stolen water. For 9 years. 62 homes. Average household usage. You're looking at somewhere north of 15 million gallons. Joe whistled low. "How much money are we talking?" Lester pulled out a calculator. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately. The way an old man's fingers move when he's being careful. "At current utility rates," he said, "plus damages, plus interest over 9 years, plus punitive, conservatively, $2.3 million. The porch swing creaked. $2.3 million, I repeated. That's on the water theft alone. Forgery. Fraud. Filing false documents. Attempted conservatorship through incapacitation. Lester looked at me over his glasses. "I'm semi-retired, Maggie. But I can still file a motion." "What kind of motion?" 2-second pause. "The kind that ends careers." That night, I couldn't sleep. Joe was in bed by 8, exhausted from the day's stress. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee and the forged easement spread out on the table. I stared at the signature until my eyes burned. Joe Calhoun. The J looped wrong. The H slanted slightly left. Joe always slanted right. His handwriting leaned forward like a man walking into wind. This signature leaned back. Someone had practiced. Someone had gotten close, but not close enough. I rubbed my ring. The gold felt thin. Fragile. 41 years of marriage reduced to a piece of metal you could bend with your fingers. A knock at the door. I checked the clock. 11:30 at night. Nobody decent knocks at 11:30. I opened the door to find Blake standing on the porch. He looked terrible. Unshaven. Eyes hollow. His shirt was wrinkled and there was a coffee stain on his collar that matched the one I'd scrubbed off Joe's shirt that morning. Like father, like son. "Mom," he said. "I need to talk to you." I didn't move. Didn't invite him in. Just stood there with my hand on the doorframe and my heart beating slow and hard. "Your wife tried to have your father arrested today," I said. "I know. She wants a conservatorship. She wants to take the ranch." "I know. She's been stealing our water for 9 years. Did you know that?" He flinched. That flinch told me everything. "How much did you know?" I asked. "Mom, please." "How much, Blake?" He looked at his shoes. They were expensive shoes. Leather loafers with little tassels that Tiffany probably picked out. He wore them like they hurt. "I knew about the water," he said quietly. "I didn't know about the forgery. Or the tea. I swear to God, I didn't know about the tea." The tea. So Lester had told him. Or maybe someone else had. "What's in the tea?" I asked. "I don't know exactly. Something that interacts with Dad's heart medication. Makes it less effective. Over time, it weakens the cardiac muscle." I felt the words hit my chest and spread outward like ice. "She's been poisoning your father. She said it was a supplement. She said it would help. And you believed her." He didn't answer. He just stood there on the porch of the house he grew up in, looking lost and broken and small. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to slap him. I did neither. "Why are you here, Blake?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thumb drive. "Everything's on here," he said. Her emails. Her texts. The original forged documents. Recordings of her phone calls with the county commissioner. She's been working with him for years. They were going to push through an adverse possession claim next month. Claimed the land was abandoned. Abandoned? "We live here." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know, Mom." He pressed the drive into my hand. His fingers were cold. "I can't stay," he said. "She'll notice I'm gone. But I had to bring you this. Blake." He stopped halfway down the porch steps. "You're going to have to choose," I said. "Soon. Her or us." He didn't turn around. But I heard him speak, so quiet I almost missed it. "I already have." Then he disappeared into the dark, and I was left holding a piece of plastic that might save our family or destroy it entirely. The next morning, Lester arrived before sunrise. He'd brought a federal agent with him. A woman in her 50s with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She introduced herself as Agent Hayes. "Your son's thumb drive made its way to my office," she said. "Through channels." "What channels?" "Lester's channels." I looked at the old lawyer. He shrugged. "I'm semi-retired," he said. "I still have friends." Agent Hayes sat down at my kitchen table like she'd been there 100 times. She spread out photographs. Documents. Bank records. "Tiffany Calhoun has been working with County Commissioner Dale Roebuck for approximately 6 years," she said. "Together, they've been filing fraudulent easements on distressed properties throughout the county. Elderly owners. Heirs who live out of state. People who won't notice a piece of paper filed at the courthouse. Taking their land," I said. "Taking their land and selling it to developers." The Maple Creek subdivision was supposed to be the first of 3. All built on stolen water. All backed by forged documents. Joe came into the kitchen, moving slower than he had the day before. He'd heard voices. He sat down heavily and listened. "Is this a federal case?" he asked. Agent Hayes nodded. "Fraud across county lines. Interstate wire transfers. Tampering with a dependent adult. That last one carries up to 20 years. Tampering," Joe said. "That's a polite word for what she did." It's the legal word. And it sticks. Lester poured himself coffee. 2-second pause. There's going to be an HOA meeting tonight, he said. Tiffany called it. Emergency session. She's going to present a motion to have Joe declared unfit and the ranch placed under conservatorship. How do you know that? Because she filed the motion yesterday afternoon. She's not wasting time. Agent Hayes folded her hands on the table. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to let her call that meeting. We're going to let her make her speech. And then we're going to walk in and arrest her in front of every single person she's been lying to. I looked at Joe. He looked at me. The ceiling fan clicked. What do we need? I asked. Everything you've got. The recording. The documents. The thumb drive. And one more thing. What? Blake. We need him to testify. My stomach dropped. He's terrified of her. He's been under her thumb for 9 years. Then it's time he got out. I spent the rest of the day preparing. I called Blake 3 times. He didn't answer. I texted him. Nothing. I even drove past his house, the big modern box on Maple Creek Drive that Tiffany had designed and decorated and presided over like a queen. The lights were on but nobody came to the door. By 6 o'clock, I was dressed in my best jeans and a clean shirt. Joe wore his Marine Corps belt buckle. The one he only wore to funerals and court appearances. You look handsome, I told him. I look old. Same thing. He laughed. A real laugh, weak but genuine. I hadn't heard that sound in months. Lester pulled up in his ancient Cadillac. Agent Hayes followed in an unmarked sedan. I put the thumb drive in my pocket and the forged easement in my purse. And my phone. Don't forget the phone. The recording was on there. The recording I'd made 3 days ago when I'd hidden my phone in the living room and left the room, knowing Tiffany would come check on Joe. Knowing she'd say something she shouldn't. She always did. You've served your purpose, old man, she'd whispered, leaning over his chair. All you have to do now is die. Then that ranch is mine. I'd been standing in the hallway, hand over my mouth, thumb rubbing my ring so hard I nearly broke the skin. Now I had it. Now I had her. We drove to the Maple Creek clubhouse. The parking lot was full. 62 houses meant 62 households, and apparently every single one of them had shown up. The building glowed with fluorescent light and righteous indignation. I could hear them inside. The murmur of voices. The scrape of folding chairs. Tiffany's voice, rising above the rest, practiced and polished and poisonous. This is it, Joe said. This is it. I love you, Maggie. 41 years and those words still hit like the first time. I love you too, you stubborn old man. We walked inside. And the room went quiet. Tiffany stood at the podium, her linen blouse crisp as fresh paper. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like a news anchor reporting on a tragedy that had nothing to do with her. Ah, she said. The Calhouns. How kind of you to join us. We were just discussing your water situation. Our water situation, I repeated. The illegal tap. The contamination. The fact that 62 families have been without water for over 24 hours because of your negligence. A murmur ran through the crowd. I felt their eyes on us. Hostile. Judgmental. She'd been working this room for hours. I have a motion on the floor, Tiffany continued. To petition the county for emergency conservatorship of the Calhoun Ranch, effective immediately, on the grounds of gross mismanagement and endangerment of public health. She was good. She was very, very good. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Before you vote, I said, I'd like to play something. Tiffany's eyes narrowed. This is highly irregular. So is poisoning your father-in-law. The room erupted. Tiffany slammed her hand on the podium. That is slander. I will have you removed. I held up my phone. Pressed play. Turned up the volume. You've served your purpose, old man. The words weren't mine. They were hers. 62 heads snapped toward the speaker. My phone. Then toward her. Tiffany's face curdled. That perfect HOA smile just dissolved. Turn that off, she hissed. Right now. I turned it up. All you have to do now is die. Then that ranch is mine. A folding chair hit the floor. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my lord." Tiffany lunged. She didn't walk around the table. She went straight over it. Muffins exploded. Agendas scattered. Her claws caught my collar and I heard fabric tear. You miserable old witch. Her hand drew back. I caught her wrist before it landed. Careful, sweetheart. Assaulting a senior citizen in front of 62 witnesses. That's a felony in Texas. She tried to twist free. Couldn't. Then the clubhouse door opened. Sheriff's deputy. Federal agent. And my son Blake, carrying a folder thick with 9 years of lies. Tiffany's arm went limp in my hand. I finally let go. Agent Hayes stepped forward, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Tiffany Calhoun, you are under arrest for felony water theft, forgery, fraud, and tampering with a dependent adult. Tiffany's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. This is a mistake, she said. I'm the victim here. I'm the one who called 911. You called 911 on an elderly couple whose water you'd been stealing for 9 years, Agent Hayes said. We have the records. We have the documents. We have your emails. She looked at Blake. Her eyes went wide with fury and disbelief. You, she whispered. You pathetic little man. You gave them everything. Blake didn't flinch. He didn't look at his shoes. He looked directly at his wife for what might have been the first time in 9 years. Yeah, he said. I did. The deputy stepped forward with handcuffs. Tiffany smoothed her sleeve cuff. Once. Twice. Her tell, firing uselessly, a habit that couldn't protect her anymore. Wait, she said. Wait. I want my lawyer. You'll get your lawyer, the deputy said. At the station. He turned her around. Her hands went behind her back. The cuffs clicked shut. The room was dead silent. I looked at Joe. He was standing straight, his marine belt buckle catching the light. His eyes were wet but his jaw was set. Well, he said. That was satisfying. And in the middle of all that chaos, surrounded by 62 stunned neighbors and scattered muffins and the wreckage of Tiffany's empire, I started to laugh. Not a polite laugh. A deep, belly-shaking, tear-streaming laugh that came from 9 years of frustration and fear and fury finally releasing. Joe joined me. Then Blake. Then half the room, because sometimes the only sane response to absolute madness is absolute laughter. The deputy led Tiffany out. She was still talking. Still spinning. Still smoothing her cuff even with her hands bound behind her back. But nobody was listening anymore. I squeezed Joe's hand. He squeezed back. Weak, but there. The war was over. We'd won. And somewhere in the back of the clubhouse, Agent Hayes was already on the phone, telling someone about County Commissioner Dale Roebuck and the other properties and the long trail of fraud that was about to unravel. But that was tomorrow's fight. Tonight, I was going to take my husband home, make him a cup of real tea, the kind that doesn't come with a side of slow poison, and sit on the porch swing until the stars came out. We'd earned it. All 300 acres. All 41 years. Every last drop of water that came from our well and our land and our blood. Tiffany thought an old man had served his purpose. She was wrong. He was just getting started. The squad car pulled away with Tiffany in the back seat, still shouting something about her lawyer and wrongful arrest and how we'd all regret this. Her voice faded down Maple Creek Drive until it was just crickets and the hum of the clubhouse air conditioner. I stood on the sidewalk, my torn collar flapping in the evening breeze, and watched the taillights disappear. That was fast, Joe said. Not fast enough. 9 years. He nodded. His hand found mine. We stood there like two old fence posts, weathered but still standing, while the HOA members filed out of the clubhouse behind us. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody apologized. A few of them muttered about getting both sides of the story. One woman stopped and stared at me like I'd personally ruined her book club. She was your president, I said to her. Your water bill was 0 for 9 years. You didn't wonder? She walked away without answering. Of course she did. Agent Hayes appeared beside me, phone still pressed to her ear. She ended the call and tucked it into her jacket pocket. Roebuck's already lawyered up, she said. Someone tipped him off. But we've got enough to hold Tiffany through the weekend. Arraignment's Monday morning. Will she make bail? Not if I have anything to say about it. Flight risk. She's got a passport and a cousin in Cancun. That almost made me smile. Tiffany in Cancun, sipping a margarita while her empire crumbled. There was a certain poetic justice in that image. Lester shuffled over, holding 2 cups of coffee he'd somehow procured from the clubhouse kitchen. He handed one to Joe and kept the other. They had a Keurig, he said, as if that explained everything. 2-second pause. We need to talk about Blake. Blake was still standing by the clubhouse door, his folder of evidence clutched against his chest like a shield. He hadn't moved since the handcuffs clicked. His face was a mess of relief and terror and something that looked almost like grief. He's going to need a lawyer too, Lester continued. He's not charged with anything, but Roebuck's people will try to drag him down. Accessory. Conspiracy. Whatever sticks. He brought us the evidence. That's a defense, not a shield. We need to get ahead of it. I looked at my son. 38 years old, and he looked like the little boy who used to hide behind my legs when strangers came to the door. He'd spent 9 years married to a predator and he'd finally broken free, but freedom didn't look much like victory on his face. I walked over to him. Blake. He flinched. My own son flinched at the sound of my voice. I'm sorry, he said. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have come sooner. I should have stopped her. I should have. How long have you been gathering evidence? He blinked. What? The thumb drive. The emails. The recordings. That's not something you do in a day. He was quiet for a moment. The folder trembled in his hands. 8 months, he said. I started 8 months ago. When I found out about the tea. 8 months. He'd been building a case against his own wife for 8 months, living in that house, sleeping next to her, pretending everything was fine while he collected the rope to hang her. Why didn't you tell us? Because I was scared. Because I was ashamed. Because every time I looked at Dad I knew I'd let this happen and I couldn't face him. Joe had walked over. He heard every word. His face was unreadable, that marine mask he wore when things got heavy. You're facing me now, Joe said. Blake looked up. Father and son, 4 feet apart, 9 years of distance between them. Dad, You brought us the evidence. You stood up in that room. You did what needed doing. I should have done it sooner. Yeah. Joe's voice was rough as gravel. You should have. But you did it. That counts for something. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. We drove home in Lester's Cadillac, all 4 of us packed into that old boat of a car. Agent Hayes followed behind. The ranch house was dark when we pulled up, just the porch light burning like it always did, the one Joe never let me turn off because he said a light in the darkness meant something. Blake stood in the driveway, staring at the house like he'd never seen it before. "I haven't been here in 2 years," he said. "I know. Tiffany said it wasn't good for me. Too much stress. Too many memories. Tiffany said a lot of things." He followed us inside. The kitchen still smelled like the coffee I'd made that morning, 100 years ago. The forged easement was still spread across the table. I gathered it up and shoved it into a drawer. Enough for one day. Joe sank into his recliner, his breathing shallow. The day had taken everything out of him. I brought him a glass of water, our water, clean and cold from a well that had been ours for 3 generations. "Drink," I said. He drank. His hand shook less than it had yesterday. Maybe that was adrenaline. Maybe it was hope. I didn't know anymore. Lester sat down at the kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. Agent Hayes stood by the door, arms crossed, watching everything. "We need to talk about the next steps," Lester said. "Tiffany's arrest is just the beginning. The real fight is the civil case. Water theft. Damages. The conservatorship motion. And Roebuck." "Roebuck's dirty," Agent Hayes said flatly. "We've suspected it for years. This case gives us the leverage we need to go after him. But we need more." "More what?" I asked. "More witnesses. Tiffany wasn't the only one. She was just the one who got caught." Blake cleared his throat. He was standing in the corner of the kitchen, still holding his folder. "There's a woman in Maple Creek," he said. "Eleanor Vance. Number 47. She's been fighting Tiffany on HOA issues for 3 years. Zoning violations. Inflated dues. She has documents." "How do you know that?" "Because I gave them to her. Every time Tiffany tried to push something illegal through the board, I made copies and left them in Eleanor's mailbox." I stared at him. 8 months of gathering evidence. And maybe longer. Maybe years of small, quiet rebellions that we'd never known about. "Blake Calhoun," I said. "You've been a double agent in your own marriage." He almost smiled. "Almost. I learned from the best. Mom, you once convinced the county assessor that our hay barn was a historical landmark to avoid a tax increase. I was 12. I never forgot." Lester snorted into his coffee. Even Agent Hayes cracked a smile. Joe laughed. A weak, wheezing laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. "The hay barn," he said. "I remember that. She had the man convinced there was a Civil War skirmish fought there. There was no skirmish. There wasn't even a barn in 1863. It was the War of Northern Aggression," I said primly. "And who's to say there wasn't a skirmish? Were you there?" That got them. Even Blake laughed, a rusty sound that seemed to surprise him. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like a family kitchen again. Then Joe started coughing. It wasn't a normal cough. It was deep and wet and wrong. He doubled over in his recliner, his face going pale, his hands gripping the armrests. "Joe?" He couldn't answer. He was gasping, struggling for air, his eyes wide with panic. "Call 911, I shouted. "Now." Blake already had his phone out. Agent Hayes was at Joe's side, checking his pulse, tilting his head back to open his airway. "His heart rate's erratic," she said. "Does he have nitroglycerin?" "In the bathroom. Medicine cabinet." Blake ran. Lester helped me lower Joe to the floor. His lips were turning blue. "Stay with me," I said. "Joe Calhoun, don't you dare leave me now. Not after all this. Not tonight." His hand found mine. His grip was weak, so weak, barely there at all. "Maggie," he whispered. "Don't talk. Save your strength. Maggie, listen." His voice was a thread. The tea. The supplement. I stopped taking it. What? 3 weeks ago. I stopped. I poured it out. I wanted to see if I felt better. I stared at him. The gray skin. The exhaustion. The coughing fits. You've been going through withdrawal, I said. Whatever she was giving you, your body's been fighting it off. Told you I was stubborn. He tried to smile. It came out as a grimace. Marine Corps, baby. Blake returned with the nitroglycerin. Agent Hayes helped Joe take it, tilting his head, keeping his airway clear. The minutes crawled by. I held his hand and rubbed my ring and prayed in a way I hadn't prayed in years, not with words, just with desperation, with the sheer refusal to let him go. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes later. They loaded Joe onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. I climbed in beside him. Blake and Lester followed in the Cadillac. Agent Hayes stayed behind to secure the house. The ride to County General was a blur of sirens and fluorescent light and the paramedic's calm voice saying words I didn't want to hear. Cardiac event, possible myocardial damage, we're doing everything we can. Joe's hand stayed in mine the whole time. His eyes were closed, but his fingers moved now and then, tapping twice against my palm. I know, I told him silently. I know you're still fighting. The emergency room was chaos. Doctors in blue scrubs. Nurses with clipboards. Machines beeping and whirring and flashing numbers that meant nothing to me. They wheeled Joe through a set of double doors and someone told me to wait and I said something I'm not proud of and then Blake was there, his arms around me, holding me back. Mom, let them work. Let them do their jobs. I can't lose him, Blake. Not now. Not after everything. I know. We sat in the waiting room for 3 hours. Lester brought terrible hospital coffee in tiny styrofoam cups. Blake stared at the floor. I stared at the double doors, willing them to open, willing someone to come out with good news. At 2 a.m, a doctor finally appeared. Young woman, maybe 35, with exhausted eyes and a clipboard. Mrs. Calhoun? I stood up so fast the room spun. How is he? Your husband is stable. He had a significant cardiac event, but we were able to stabilize him with medication. The good news is that the damage appears to be minimal. The bad news is that his blood work shows elevated levels of a compound we usually only see in cases of long-term medication interference. What does that mean? It means someone was giving him something that interfered with his heart medication. The levels are declining now, which suggests he stopped taking it recently. If he'd continued much longer, the damage would have been irreversible. The tea. The supplement. 3 weeks ago he'd stopped taking it, and that decision had just saved his life. Can I see him? Briefly. He's asking for you. Joe was propped up in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines, looking small and gray and utterly furious about all of it. Told you, he said when he saw me. Stubborn. I kissed his forehead. His skin was cool and papery. You scared me to death. Scared myself. Not doing that again. He paused, catching his breath. Did they arrest Roebuck yet? Not yet. Tell Hayes to hurry up. I want to watch. That was my husband. Half dead in a hospital bed and still itching for the next fight. I stayed with him until the nurses kicked me out. Blake was waiting in the hallway, leaning against the wall with his eyes closed. He's going to be okay, I said. Blake opened his eyes. They were red. He'd been crying. Mom, I need to tell you something else. Something I should have told you months ago. My stomach tightened. What? Tiffany wasn't just working with Roebuck. She was working with someone from the State Water Board. Someone who helped her file fake test results. The contamination claims. The manure runoff. All of it was fabricated. We knew that. You don't understand. The false test results were sent to the EPA 6 months ago. Tiffany filed a formal complaint alleging that our ranch was polluting the county water supply. If that complaint goes through, the EPA can seize the land. Cleanup costs. Fines. We could lose the ranch even if Tiffany goes to prison. The hallway tilted. I put my hand against the wall to steady myself. Who at the EPA? I don't know. The complaint was filed anonymously. But Tiffany bragged about it once, said she had a nuclear option if things went wrong. This is it. 6 months ago. She'd planted this bomb 6 months ago, long before the arrest, long before the HOA meeting, long before any of us knew what she was capable of. Does Lester know? I told him before we left the house. He's making calls. I looked at my son. He was exhausted and terrified and carrying a weight that would have crushed a weaker man. And yet here he was, still standing, still fighting. You should have told us sooner, I said. I know. But you're telling us now. That's what matters. He nodded. His jaw tightened. I'm going to make this right, Mom. I don't know how, but I'm going to make it right. I believe you. And I did. For the first time in 9 years, I actually believed him. The next morning, we gathered in Joe's hospital room. Lester, Agent Hayes, Blake, and me. Joe was sitting up, still attached to monitors but looking more like himself. The color was coming back to his face. Lester had his legal pad out. He'd been on the phone since 4 in the morning. I found the EPA contact, he said. Tiffany filed the complaint through a regional administrator named Marcus Webb. He's been in his position for 12 years. Before that, he worked for a private land development firm in Houston. Let me guess, I said. The same firm that developed Maple Creek. 2-second pause. The very same. Agent Hayes nodded. Webb has been on our radar. He's connected to several questionable land seizures in East Texas. We've never been able to make a case stick. Can you now? Joe asked. With Blake's testimony, the forged documents, and the evidence of Tiffany's connection to Webb, we can make a very compelling argument. But it's going to take time. How much time? Weeks. Maybe months. The federal government doesn't move fast. Joe looked at me. I looked at Lester. We don't have months, I said. If the EPA complaint is still active, they could move on the ranch at any time. Lester set down his pen. He paused exactly 2 seconds, but this pause felt different. Heavier. There is one way to speed this up, he said. How? Tiffany flips. The room went quiet. Agent Hayes raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we make a deal with her? After everything she did? I'm suggesting we use her as leverage. She's facing 20 years. If we offer her reduced time in exchange for testimony against Webb and Roebuck, she might take it. She tried to kill my husband. I know. But Webb can seize your land. Roebuck can walk free and run for re-election. Tiffany is the key to both of them. Sometimes you have to deal with the devil you know to catch the devil you don't. Joe's hand tapped the bed rail. Twice. No deal, he said. Joe. No deal. I won't let her walk away with a slap on the wrist. Not after what she did to this family. Not after what she did to Blake. Blake looked up. Dad, if it saves the ranch. The ranch isn't worth my soul. Or yours. We fight this clean. We fight it right. And if we lose the land, at least we lose it with our integrity intact. The room was silent. Lester stared at his legal pad. Agent Hayes nodded slowly, a look of something like respect crossing her usually stoic face. I walked over to Joe's bed and took his hand. You're a stubborn old fool, I said. So I've been told. Good. Don't ever change. Blake stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, the Texas sun baking the asphalt, the heat shimmer rising in waves. There's another way, he said. We all turned to look at him. Tiffany kept backups. She didn't trust anyone, not even her own co-conspirators. Every meeting with Webb, every payment to Roebuck, every bribe to the county inspector, she kept a record. I know where she hid them. Where? Agent Hayes asked. Safety deposit box. First National Bank downtown. She thinks I don't know about it. But I found the key 6 months ago. I made a copy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. She kept it in a jewelry box, he said. With her grandmother's pearls. I figured if she could hide things in plain sight, so could I. I looked at the key. Then at my son. You broke into her safety deposit box? No. Not yet. I was waiting for the right moment. He turned to Agent Hayes. With a federal warrant, we can open it legally. Everything you need to take down Webb and Roebuck. Every bribe. Every kickback. Every dirty deal. Agent Hayes took the key. She held it up to the light. Mr. Calhoun, I think you just changed the entire case. Blake, I said. You've been sitting on this for 6 months? I was scared. But I'm not scared anymore. He said it simply. Quietly. Without drama or self-pity. Just a fact, stated plainly, the way you'd say the sun was coming up or the well was running clear. Joe looked at his son. His eyes were wet again, but this time it wasn't sadness. It was pride. Semper Fi, Joe said. Blake straightened. Semper Fi, Dad. The Marines. Both of them. Different generations, different wars, but the same motto. Always faithful. I didn't cry. I wanted to. The tears were right there, burning behind my eyes. But I'd learned a long time ago that crying didn't fix anything. Action fixed things. Evidence fixed things. A safety deposit key and a federal warrant fixed things. So I rubbed my ring and I made a plan. Lester, how fast can we get that warrant? With what we have now. By tomorrow morning. And the safety deposit box? If everything's there, Webb and Roebuck will be in custody by Monday. The EPA complaint will be flagged as fraudulent. The ranch will be safe. And Tiffany? She goes down with the rest of them. No deal. Just the full weight of the law. Joe smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. Good, he said. Now somebody get me some real food. This hospital jello is a crime against humanity. I laughed. We all laughed. It was absurd and inappropriate and exactly what we needed. Outside the hospital window, the sun was climbing over the Texas horizon. Somewhere in the county jail, Tiffany was probably still screaming about her lawyer. Somewhere in his office, Commissioner Roebuck was sweating through his shirt. Somewhere in the First National Bank, a safety deposit box sat waiting, full of secrets that would bring them all down. And here, in this cramped hospital room, my family was finally coming back together. Not perfectly. Not completely. Wounds like these took years to heal, and some of them never would. But it was a start. I squeezed Joe's hand. He squeezed back, stronger than before. The war wasn't over yet. But for the first time in 9 years, we were on the offensive. And I had a feeling we were going to win. The warrant came through at 7:30 the next morning. Agent Hayes picked me up in her unmarked sedan. Lester was already in the back seat, holding a thermos of coffee and wearing the same suspenders he'd worn for 3 days straight. Blake followed in his truck. Nobody said much. The kind of quiet that settles over people who know they're walking towards something big and dangerous and absolutely necessary. The First National Bank downtown was one of those old buildings with marble floors and brass fixtures and tellers who'd worked there since before the internet. The manager, a thin man with a bow tie, met us at the door. "We've been expecting you," he said. The federal marshals called ahead. He led us to the vault. The safety deposit box was number 714. Blake handed over the key. The manager inserted his own master key alongside it. 2 locks. 2 turns. The box slid out with a sound like a drawer opening in an empty house. Agent Hayes put on gloves. She lifted the lid. The box was full. Papers. Photographs. A ledger with handwritten entries. USB drives. A burner phone. And at the very bottom, a stack of cash wrapped in rubber bands. "Oh, Tiffany," I murmured. "You kept receipts." Agent Hayes lifted the ledger. She flipped through the pages, her expression unchanging, but I saw her jaw tighten. "This is everything," she said. "Payments to Roebuck. Wire transfers to Webb. The fake EPA test results. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers." She documented her own conspiracy. "She always thought she was the smartest person in the room," Blake said. "She probably planned to use this as leverage if anyone tried to cross her." Lester picked up one of the USB drives. "Insurance." She built herself a dead man's switch and locked it in a vault. Instead it became ours. Agent Hayes bagged the evidence. She made calls from the bank lobby, her voice low and urgent. I caught fragments: warrant execution, county commissioner's office, EPA regional headquarters, arrest team standing by. Blake sat down on a marble bench near the door. His hands were shaking. I sat beside him. "You okay?" "I don't know." He stared at the floor. "I married her, Mom. I brought her into this family. Everything that happened to Dad, to the ranch, to you, it all traces back to me." "No. It traces back to her. You didn't poison your father. You didn't forge easements. You didn't steal water for 9 years." I looked the other way. "For a while. And then you stopped looking away. You started gathering evidence. You risked everything to make it right." I put my hand on his. "That's not weakness, Blake. That's the definition of courage. You were afraid and you did it anyway." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you think Dad will ever forgive me?" "Your father loves you." He never stopped. "Not for one day." "That's not the same as forgiveness." "No. It's not. Forgiveness takes time. Trust takes longer. But you're his son. He's been waiting 9 years for you to come home. Don't make him wait any longer." Blake nodded. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Then he stood up and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" "To see Dad. If I hurry, I can catch him before the sedation wears off." He left. I watched him go, my son, 38 years old and finally growing up. Lester appeared beside me. 2-second pause. "The marshals are moving on Roebuck's office now. Webb's being detained at his home in Houston. The EPA complaint will be flagged as fraudulent by noon." "And Tiffany?" "She's been formally charged. 16 counts. Felony water theft. Forgery. Fraud. Tampering with a dependent adult. Conspiracy." The judge denied bail. "Good. There's one complication. Tiffany's attorney filed an emergency motion this morning. She's claiming she's the victim of spousal abuse. That Blake coerced her into everything." I felt my blood go hot. "That's a lie." "Of course it's a lie. But it buys her time. She'll use it to try and shift blame. Will it work?" Lester's pause was longer than usual. 4 seconds. 5. "Not with the evidence we have. But it's going to get ugly before it gets clean." "When does it ever get clean?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Joe came home from the hospital 3 days later. The doctors wanted to keep him longer, but Joe Calhoun had never been good at following orders. He signed himself out against medical advice and showed up at the ranch house in a taxi, wearing his Marine Corps belt buckle and a stubborn expression. They were trying to kill me with boredom, he said. Jell-O and daytime television. I'd rather die on my own porch. I helped him into his recliner. He was weaker than before. The cardiac event had taken something permanent from him. The doctors said his heart was operating at 60% capacity. With medication and rest, he might get a few good years. Without it, they gave him months. He chose the porch. I brought him a glass of our well water. Cold. Clean. Tasted like limestone and history. Webb's in custody, I told him. Roebuck resigned this morning. The EPA complaint has been withdrawn. Lester says the civil case against Tiffany is a lock. We'll get damages. Not the full $2.3 million, but enough to keep the ranch running for years. And the water? It's ours. All of it. The county's already sent a crew to cap the illegal line. Maple Creek is on municipal water now. Their bills are going up 40%. Joe smiled. Good. We sat together in the quiet, the way we'd sat 1,000 times before. The porch swing creaked. The ceiling fan clicked. The sun was going down over the mesquite trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Blake came to see me, Joe said. At the hospital. The day you were at the bank. What did he say? Nothing. At first. Just sat there for 20 minutes, staring at his shoes. Joe shook his head. Then he started crying. Apologizing. Over and over. Said he was sorry for not protecting us. Sorry for believing her. Sorry for staying so long. What did you say? I told him to stop apologizing and start living. Told him I loved him. Told him his room was still here if he wanted it. Is he coming home? I don't know. That's up to him. But the door's open. It's always been open. I reached over and took his hand. It was cool and dry and felt lighter than it should. You're a good father, Joe Calhoun. I'm a stubborn old man who made a lot of mistakes. Same thing. He laughed. That weak, wheezing laugh that I'd come to treasure more than any sound in the world. Tiffany's trial was set for October. She tried everything. The spousal abuse claim. A motion to suppress the safety deposit box evidence. A last-minute offer to plead guilty to a misdemeanor in exchange for probation. The judge denied every single one. I attended every hearing. Sat in the front row. Made sure she saw me. She looked different in her orange jumpsuit. Smaller. Plainer. The makeup was gone. The perfect hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Without the armor of her linen blouses and her HOA smile, she was just a scared woman facing 20 years. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Blake testified for 2 full days, laying out every detail of the conspiracy. The forged easements. The stolen water. The fake EPA complaint. The tea. His voice shook at first, but as the hours passed, something changed in him. He sat straighter. Spoke clearer. Made eye contact with the jury. The boy who hid behind my legs was gone. In his place was a man who had faced the worst thing he'd ever done and decided to make it right. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. The verdict came back on a Thursday afternoon. Guilty. On all counts. The judge sentenced Tiffany to 18 years in federal prison. No parole. No early release. 18 years to think about what she'd done. As the bailiff led her away, she looked back at me. Her face was blank. No tears. No anger. Just emptiness. I could have been a good daughter-in-law, she said. No, I said. You couldn't have. She disappeared through the side door. I never saw her again. Commissioner Roebuck took a plea deal. 15 years. Marcus Webb got 12. The EPA launched an internal investigation that uncovered 3 more fraudulent land seizures connected to Webb's office. 4 families got their property back. Lester came out of semi-retirement. Just for a few months, he said. Just to finish the civil case. He got us $1.7 million in damages. Enough to pay off the ranch's debts. Enough to fix the fences and replace the well pump and put something aside for the future. He still comes by for coffee 3 times a week. Still pauses 2 seconds before answering any question. Still wears those same suspenders. You know, he told me once, I handled bigger cases in my career. More money. More prestige. But this one felt different. Different how? 2-second pause. This one mattered. Joe died on a Tuesday morning in late November. He was on the porch, in his recliner, watching the sun come up over the mesquite trees. I brought him coffee and found him with his eyes closed and a small smile on his face. No pain. No struggle. Just peace. I sat down beside him and held his hand until the ambulance came. His fingers were still warm. The wedding ring he'd worn for 41 years caught the morning light. I didn't cry right away. I made phone calls. Blake. Lester. The funeral home. The church. I did all the things you do when someone dies, all the practical tasks that keep you moving, keep you from thinking, keep you from feeling the hole that's opening up beneath your feet. The crying came later. After the funeral. After the neighbors left and the casseroles ran out and the house went quiet. I sat alone on the porch swing, the one that still creaked in exactly the same place, and I sobbed until my ribs hurt and my throat was raw. Then I wiped my face, poured myself a glass of well water, and started planning the next thing. Because that's what Joe would have wanted. Not endless tears. Not a shrine. Just action. Just moving forward. Blake stayed. He moved back into his old room the week after the funeral. He was quiet at first, walking around the house like a guest who wasn't sure he was welcome. But gradually, day by day, he started to belong again. He fixed the porch step. The one that had been loose for 3 years. He repaired the fence along the east pasture. He learned to run the well pump and balance the ranch accounts and do all the things Joe had done for 40 years without anyone noticing. One evening, I found him standing by the mesquite tree where he'd carved his initials as a boy. His fingers were tracing the letters. I was 11, he said. Dad gave me a pocket knife for my birthday. He said a man should know how to whittle. I carved my initials here and he pretended to be mad about it, but I saw him smile when he thought I wasn't looking. He kept that smile for years. Every time he walked past this tree. Blake turned to me. His eyes were wet. I wasted so much time, Mom. 9 years with her. 9 years away from you and Dad. 9 years I'll never get back. You can't get those years back. But you can use the ones you have left. He nodded. Then he hugged me. A real hug, not the stiff, awkward hugs he'd given me during the Tiffany years. This one was warm and solid and lasted long enough to count. We planted the live oak on the first day of spring. I picked the spot. The west end of the porch, right where Joe used to watch the sunset. Blake dug the hole. Lester came over to supervise, which meant he sat on the porch swing with a cup of coffee and offered unhelpful commentary. The sapling was small. Maybe 3 feet tall. But the nursery owner said it would grow 20 feet in 10 years, with deep roots and strong branches. Kind of like this family, I said. Blake lowered the tree into the hole. We filled it in together, packing the dirt around the roots, watering it from our well. What do you think he'd say? Blake asked. If he could see this? I looked at the tree. Then at the porch. Then at the mesquite tree with the initials carved into its bark. He'd say it's about time. And then he'd complain about the placement and tell us we should have put it 6 feet to the left. Blake laughed. You're right. He would. Agent Hayes called a week later. She had news about the EPA investigation. 6 more officials had been implicated in the land seizure scheme. 4 families had been reunited with their property. 2 more cases were pending. "I thought you'd want to know," she said. "Your case was the domino that knocked everything else over." "Is it over? The investigation?" "No. It's going to take years. But the worst of it is done." She paused. "Your husband would have been proud." "He was proud. He just didn't say it much. Men like him never do." She was right about that. The months passed. Spring turned to summer. The live oak grew 6 inches. Blake started dating again, a woman named Sarah who worked at the county library and didn't seem to care about his complicated history. She came to dinner once. I liked her immediately. She asked about the ranch, about the well, about the water, and she listened to the answers like they mattered. Lester still came by for coffee. The ranch still needed work every day. The well still ran clear and cold and true. And I still missed Joe. Not in the sharp, desperate way of the first few months. That faded. What remained was a quiet ache, a presence in the empty chair beside me, a voice I could almost hear in the creak of the porch swing and the click of the ceiling fan. Some nights, I sat out on the porch until the stars came out. I'd drink a glass of well water and think about 41 years of marriage and 300 acres of dirt and all the things we'd built and fought for and nearly lost and finally saved. The ranch was safe. The water was ours. The family was healing. It wasn't a perfect ending. Some things were still broken. Blake and I had good days and bad days. The ranch finances were stable but not abundant. The live oak was still small, still fragile, still needing protection from the wind and the drought and the 100 small threats that could kill a young tree before it had a chance to grow. But it was growing. So were we. One evening, I walked out to the live oak with a glass of water. I poured a little at the base of the trunk, right where the roots were taking hold. "This is from our well," I said to nobody and everybody. "Clean and cold. Just the way you liked it." The porch swing creaked behind me, moved by a breeze or by nothing at all. I sat down in Joe's old recliner. The sun was going down. The mesquite trees were casting long shadows across the pasture. Somewhere down the road, a neighbor's dog was barking. Somewhere in the house, Blake was making coffee. I rubbed my wedding ring with my thumb. The gold was thin after all these years. Almost sharp enough to cut. But it held. It still held. And I closed my eyes and listened to the well pump humming in the distance. That old sound. That constant sound. The heartbeat of the Calhoun Ranch, pumping clean water from deep underground, the same water that had been here before us and would be here after. Tiffany thought an old man had served his purpose. She thought she could steal what took 3 generations to build. She thought she was untouchable. She was wrong about all of it. The water was still flowing. The land was still ours. And somewhere out there in the Texas twilight, I could almost hear Joe laughing. Stubborn old man. Faithful to the end. Always faithful.